We're going to go through the gear sets that we have on the build platform individually. And I apologize in advance. I'm going to probably get my huge gorilla hands in the way of the camera, but you can try and follow along up there. You can see this is kind of like like an Elmo, where I'm going to display what I can up there, and then you guys will be able to check it out. So what I'm doing is I'm resetting this up. Now let me introduce you to the first part that's most important that we're going to need. Can you go close the door? Thank you. All right, so you can see already, right here, that I have set up a bunch of these black bushings. These are kind of like, they make sure that when the shafts go through the metal part, that the shafts are stable. Because you can put this through here and it's going to turn, right? Like it turns. However, you can also see that it's square, the shaft is square, and the metal hole is square. So it's going to press against there once you put weight on it, and it's not going anywhere. So what these do is by putting these black bushings on here, it allows the shaft to flow freely, and it's not as wobbly. Because right now, I shake it, nothing. I bring it over here, and I shake it. You get a lot of movement out of it, right? So you got to make sure that every time you're putting a shaft through metal, that you're going to be using the black bushings. It's vital, absolutely important, utmost importance. One of the things you can do, though, is you're ever in a point where you're making something that you only have one piece of steel, you don't have it double thick like this is, you're going to have to make a trick in order to convince the shaft to stay stable. Because, like, if I'm holding it here, if I'm holding it in my hands at 2 points, and it won't wobble. But if I'm holding it at one point, it'll wobble back and forth. So that's why you have the 2 points of contact here and here on the metal. So what you can do is in the parts containers, there are these things called stand-ups, and you only have them in I believe the 1-inch size is all I give you guys. There's other ones, but don't worry about it. These are the ones you're going to use most often. I attach 2 stand-ups to a black bushing. So I just put them through the black bushing like that. You can see I've already got one attached, and I attach another one. This way, I can then screw them into the other piece of the metal where the other bushing is. So like they would be stacked like this, and then if they were both open in the middle, then the shaft could come through and it would create an automatic support through here. You see how that works? This way it's doubled up even though I don't add the second piece of metal. Depending on what you're building, this is going to be a very useful tool for stabilizing your robot. Because what is a robot that doesn't have moving parts? A statue. Yeah, that's all it is. It's an art installation at that point. So what I've done here is I've already got 3 of them in place. You can see right here flowing, these have 3 holes. A lot of people want to put a screw on each side and have the shaft go through the middle. But because of what we're doing, I actually made them flexible. So I only put 1 screw here, and then I put another bushing on the back side, because you got to have a bushing on each side. Otherwise, it'll get caught on one side and still become unstable. So I made sure they're the same. So right now, I can go here, or I can go here. And on the left of this, I'm going to put another one. So when you guys get to test this out, oh, my watch just got magnetically attached to the board. So now I'm attaching this. Just a simple nut and a screw, or not. So remember how I keep saying that you don't want to use a screw any longer than you need? That's exactly what you're going to have happen here. So what this does, it allows me to create a way to test out using different gears. So the first thing we're going to look at is gears and their gear size and how that matters. So I'm going to put my first gear in here, put it right there. Now you can see that the gear has a line on it. That's going to become important in a second. I'm going to put another gear in here. By the way, right now I'm putting the gears on the shafts, and I haven't put any of the things that you guys call donuts on them. The donuts are also referred to as set collars, and you would use these, you'd put them on here, and then you would tighten them up to hold the gear in place so that it doesn't move. Because you don't want, once your wheel starts moving, you don't want the gear moving along the shaft and then popping loose. So you'd put a set collar on each side. I'm not doing that today because we're going fast. So I've got the second gear here. Now if you notice, this one also has a line pointing up. Now, when it comes to gears, there's an input and there's an output. The input is where the energy to make the gears move comes in. The output is what the gears are going to. So think of a bicycle. Where you pedal is the input. The wheels that turn is the output. So we're going to take a quick look at gear ratio. First, what's going to happen to these lines when I turn this? Are they going to spin together or apart? You think they're going to go opposite of each other? Okay, so let's see. You're right, they go apart. Now, notice that the lines meet back up in the middle. So one spin of the input gear equals how many spins of the output gear? One spin of the input gear equals how many spins of the output gear? I'll show you again. Watch the lines. Yeah, 1. It's a 1-to-1 ratio. That's because the gears are the same size. Now, if I make the input gear bigger, what's going to happen to the output gear? Is it going to spin more times or less? More times, yeah. So what we're going to do is we're going to do the opposite. I'm going to do the, I got to leave that one in there. So I'm going to take that input gear. I'm going to, instead of replace it with a small, or that output gear in place, I'm going to replace it with a very small input gear. Now you can see I have the line up top. So if I start turning the small gear, the gear's already gone around once, but how many times has the big gear gone around? About a third, yeah. So it'll take 3 rotations, 2 rotations, and 3 rotations. So this is a 3 rotations on the input equals 1 rotation on the output. However, say that the big gear was the input gear. Watch when I spin this one time. How fast it goes around. That's pretty wild though. So you never know what you're going to end up with. The best way to do it though is you can add up the teeth, or you can look at the diagram that I'm going to provide you on the V drive, and that can give you the input gear ratios. But what you got to remember is that big input gear with a small output gear is speed. But small input gear with a big output gear is torque. Torque is what moves things. So think about being on your bicycle if you have a 10-speed bike. If you're on flat ground or going downhill, you like to use that, you switch to that one gear where you just like push a little bit harder and the wheel goes super fast and you can pick up speed, right? But if you suddenly switch to going uphill on that one, you stop dead in your tracks because it's too hard to push to make that gear go. So what you do is you switch to a lower gear where you're spinning your feet real fast, but the wheel's going up slowly because it doesn't hurt you to go up the hill, but you're using more input to create a stronger output, so it's not as hard to do. That's the basic idea of input and output gears that way when it comes to torque and speed. If you make a vehicle that's too heavy on speed, it won't move because it doesn't have enough torque. If you make a vehicle that's really heavy on torque, it's going to go slow. So this is a simple gear train. Next, we're going to take a look at what happens when we add a third gear to this. So I'm going to have you make a couple of predictions. All right. So let me set these in place. There we go. Okay. Hold on. There we go. Now, the middle gear on this one is called an idler. An idler is used to do a particular task, but we're going to see what it is in a second. I want you to make 2 predictions. First prediction I want you to make is which way will the lines go on the input gear on this side and the output gear on this side? Which direction will they move? They'll both go in the, will they go in the same direction or will they go in opposite directions? Same. They'll go in same. And then, do you think the size of the idler gear, the gear in the middle, will change the gear ratio? Yeah. You think it will? Well, let's take a look. First, let's see if they go in the same direction. Yes, they appear to go in the same direction. Now as we watch they turn, does the idler gear appear to be affecting their gear ratio? No. No. So no matter the size of the idler gear, the input gear and the output gear have the same gear ratio. Whatever they're set up to be, that's going to be the way it is. This is important because sometimes you can use a huge idler gear to give you space between things, or a small idler gear in order to compact things and make sure the gears go in the same direction. Now here's the fun thing. Imagine I put another gear on this. So right here I have the big input, or well, it's actually the medium-sized input gear, going to the little gear, which we already know is going to spin fast, right? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to add another medium input gear, and I need a spacer. And I'm going to then make that spin another small gear. So take a look. So if I use the right side gear as the input gear, it's going to make the small gear do what? Go fast or slow? It'll go fast. And then once that gear is on the same shaft as this set of gears, this medium input gear is going to be going fast from the one behind it. What's going to happen over here? It's going to go super fast, right? So let's see. Oh, I need to put a crank on the back side because I do not have the hand strength for this without a crank. So you can see that even though the small gears are the same in size, they're actually spinning differently because you're stepping up the speed, which means that the output gear is going super fast over here. So those are things you can pay attention to when it comes to gearing. You'll also notice that they're not an idler gear. Well, they are idler gears because they're going the same direction, but you can still affect the speed because it's not an idler gear in the middle, it's an idler gear offset. So you can make, but the thing is, if you overdo it going for speed, what are you going to have? None of torque, right? So, in order, or roughly in order of what the book has, the next two things they have are the ability to change direction. Now, when it comes to using motors, one of the things that you're going to have to do occasionally is change direction. So what we have here is a worm and wheel gear. This is called a worm because it rolls along one side, and this is a wheel because, well, it's a wheel. So the power comes in here at the worm. If you try to turn it here on the top, it will not turn. There's only one input and only one output. On the other gears, the input and output could be different, right? But on this one, there's only one input, only one output. By the way, you guys will eventually have to build this and draw this, so it's best to pay attention. By the way, I'll have diagrams up on the yellow board to try and show you what they look like when they're built, and so you can take a look at them. Plus, you see the monstrosity behind me, the one that's got all the things on it? You can always take a look at that as an example of how I built it that's different than the book. So, right here, you can see that as I turn the one wheel, this is a very, very, very slow system, right? You can see from the sets on the set collar that this is going around like crazy before the wheel goes around. It takes forever. The way that this works is you have the adjustable gussets right here, which allow you to go to slide this up and down. So if this isn't touching, then it's not going to work. So you use the gussets to slide the worm into place so that it meets the gear, so that when you turn it, things go. And then it's just your basic design behind it. This is where you can see I use the set collars correctly. And then I go through that way, and then the power can come out the other side. So this can be used to transfer energy and change directions. It's called the worm and wheel gear. The next gear to change directions is going to be a little more difficult. And that's going to be the first one that makes me change the setup back to how I had it when we first started. I'm going to do, remember how I said to be smart lazy in the past? What you're going to want to do here is instead of taking this off and rebuilding it entirely, I just loosen it up a little bit and I just change the direction. So now it's going up and down. By the way, I don't think I need to say this for you guys, but I'm just going to say it anyway. Lefty loosey, righty tighty. That's how you remember to tighten and loosen things. Not everybody's heard that before. So now I have two spots up and down here. What I can do once I have that is I can bring in the bevel gear. The bevel gear, they're going to have a couple different ways of making it. The way that they make it in the book is ridiculous looking because they want it to come in using two of the mushroom gears, which if you look, creates this weird angle. It's almost like a 45-degree angle, or I'm sorry, not a 45-degree, 120-degree angle in. It's very weird. If you use two of those, it's going to create an obtuse angle at the inside. If you use a mushroom gear and then a wide flat gear, it'll create a 90-degree angle. You can see that way it's 90 degrees. One sits on top, one turns the other. That's 90 degrees. And then if you use two of the wide flat gears, you end up having a very tight angle. This is more like a 45. So you can change the angle in which you're adjusting the power by which gears you use. Also, if you're using this to make a car, when you create this and you change the angles, you are also going to be changing the gear ratio. So in this setup, which would I want to be the input gear if I want to make the car go fast? Which one? The one in my hand or the one on the metal? No, I would want the input gear to be this one because this one spins, the small one goes fast if I want to make that happen. So let's go ahead and set this up. By the way, when you guys make this, you will screw it into place. I am just going fast for an example today. Just think of how lucky the people watching this video are that they get to see my hairy hand like you guys. All right. So now, I'm going to take the wide flat gear. This is where set collars are necessary because the bevel gears like to come apart a lot. So once I have this set, I would use set collars to hold this in place. And you can see that once I have that, one input will go to the output. They like to move around if you don't make things nice and tight. And this changes the direction of power by 90 degrees. So you'll need a set collar behind there to keep the gear in place, otherwise it'll just push itself back and you'll lose it. But bevel gear is a really useful gear once you can get it. Because once you build your car, if you put the motor on the left side of the car and it's going to control the gears, it's also going to put an undue amount of power on weight on the left side of the car. So imagine if you have all your weight on one side of your bicycle while you're riding it. What's going to happen? You're going to fall, you're going to pull to that side, right? So people will start with a car facing forward and then they'll just take a big J hook because all the weight is on one side. So this bevel gear is a great way to get your motor on top, and then you can line up the weight so that it doesn't throw your car off one way or the other. The third way to change the direction of power is what's called a universal joint. So I'm going to take this away. I'm going to show you the universal joint that I pre-built. So, in order to build the universal joint the easy way, what you're going to do is you're going to use two gussets and one of these U-shaped channels. The way they have you do it is they have you use a bunch of cut steel. But if you look carefully, you can see that you can just use this to adjust the distance. And what it does, by having this set up the way it is, you can tighten these sides to have it go at any angle. So I'm going to tighten it facing upwards. Have you ever seen a monster truck? They usually have a universal joint for the drive shaft because you do not want to have this truck that's jacked up real high and then having a drive shaft going across the middle that's level between the cars, because that defeats the point of jacking the truck up, right? So you usually have the drive shafts coming up at an angle and they meet in the middle with universal joints. Same idea here. So I'm going to do the thing I said not to do, and I'm going to put this in without black bushings. By the way, this part itself is the universal joint. You can see that I can spin it at an angle, and it works. You go too tight of an angle, though, it doesn't work. It starts to break. And if you're very careful, you can see the inside is a squarish looking piece of metal that all of this stuff goes through, and that's what allows it to flex in different directions. So let's put this in there. All right. So. All right. My bad. So I'm going to loosen this up. I'm going to put this through the middle. And then once I set it up, my suggestion, by the way, is to plan ahead. So that's the nice thing about creating video, though, is I can go back and edit this out later. So you can see here, I've got the universal joint. Right now, kind of at a straight angle. You can see that there's a little bit of bend to it. I can bring the universal joint up at more of an angle. And the input and output. You can go up or down with this as you spin. So, and it broke loose. So, that's the universal joint. This is one of the things that you will not use too often. But when you do use it, it's pretty awesome. The next gear set is going to be the most fun gear set. Everybody loves it. The chain set, the chain drive, which, by the way, everybody likes to hold the chain and make it look like a snake. Ooh, it's a snake. It's a snake. It's a snake. But the thing is that people get confused. They're like, well, how do I make the chain longer or shorter? The thing is, it's really easy if you look at just one piece of it. You take it apart and you look at one single piece, you can see that it's got open loops and then nubbies. And so, it seems crazy, but the open loops snap into the nubbies of the other piece. And then, you take the other end of the chain and you snap them together. And then you have a chain. And then if you want to undo them, you just put your finger in there and break it off. So, while I set up the chain, I want to show you guys something. The nice thing about chain drive is it is not limited in the direction it can go. I strongly recommend when you use the spline drive or the regular gears, like the simple gear train, that they be on line with each other. The shafts be on line, either up and down or left and right. You don't want to go at angles. You end up having bad things happen. So we have the chain drive gear there. And then you can see that sometimes the gears will have this big open space in them and you can't get the shaft through there. However, you can add these black spacers, which are in one of the containers, which will make it so that you can put the shaft through there. Because these things get chewed up. So do I throw out the gear or do I just replace it with a new black spacer? By the way, fun fact, I referred to these gears as spline drive gears. That's because they touch when they turn. Whereas these gears, the chain drive gears, are sprocket-based gears, which serves you absolutely no purpose whatsoever in this class, but it's an interesting fact. So I've set up the two chains. Okay, no two chains jokes? Okay, moving along. The nice thing is you can put these at any angle to each other. You can move up and down. They're totally adjustable. What you have to do is once you set them up, you just bring the chain under them and then you try to have them meet in the middle, and you just try to figure out where they're at. So you can see my hand right now, I'm kind of holding the one piece to the other, and I meet in the middle, so I just mark it with my hand, and then I will take off this piece of chain. Here's the deal though, when it comes to the chains, if they are too loose, they might skip catching. If they are too tight, the chain might break open a lot. Right now I think I might have it too tight. So, oh, there it is. Yeah, chain's fun to play with. Totally fun. Stop laughing. There we go. Okay. So yeah. So there we go. After much struggle, I got it together. Now you can see, it's just like the other gears, we have a gear ratio here. This one's going to spin faster if this one's the input, and vice versa. You get power, or you get speed, and you get torque. So that's the chain drive. Now, I'm going to have to switch out this plate for the other plate. So while I do that, I'm going to bring in the big monster that I created. Remember what I said, that this big monster here is everything all at once. This is all the things. So you can see right here, you have the simple gear train. If I turn it around, it might make that cool squeaking sound we all love. It has a simple gear train with idler, a worm and wheel gear, a bevel gear, two, count them, two, oh, where'd it go? Universal joints. All right, so we've seen those things so far. Oh, and on the front you saw the chain drive. The first thing I want to show you is the rack and pinion. Rack and pinion allows you to move something left or right. This is commonly used in steering for cars, but there's many other places where rack and pinion can be used. One of the things I want you to be aware of is that when you make the rack and pinion, you need to build this steel U-channel first. This thing here, you need to place it in because everything else goes on top of it. Once you have this track in there, you cannot tighten anything down in here. It's impossible. So you attach this piece first, then you go to these green pieces right here. These green pieces can be screwed in directly through the steel. There's no nut necessary. You just screw in right into them. An example you can see is right here on the top. You screw in from the bottom and you screw the track in to make it steady from the top. The reason that this one does not have a screw in the top is so that I can actually take it apart so you guys can see it. If there was a screw in there, it would stop it. With this one, in order to make the rack and pinion, you also have these inner channels. These go on the inside of the track, and then they can be screwed in using the gold nuts into what they're going to, which in this case is the rack and pinion parts, the teeth. So when you're trying to figure out how to build yours, you can take mine apart, as long as you know how to put it back together. So once you have these parts built, then you just build the small gear. That's the best gear I find that makes this work. And you throw a handle on there, and you can create a rack and pinion. This would be similar to like car windows. If you ever had crank car windows that go up and down on like an old truck or an old car, something like that. Next up, we have behind it the lead screw, which you can see looks similar to the worm and wheel gear, but let me show you the difference. This is the worm and wheel gear. It has very tight coils on the screw part, and this is the lead screw. It's significantly taller. It looks like they stretched out the other one. And this one has a nubby end on one side, and on the other side, at the very same spot, a hole. This way, the lead screw will seamlessly come together. You can actually see the seam in the middle of the screen. where these two parts meet. You can see the seam. Now the lead screw is used to allow something to go back and forth. It's similar to the other one, but the track is upside down, and the green thing that you used to secure the track to the base before actually is used to slide back and forth across the base. And here you can see clearly that the screws go directly into the green thing from the part that holds the lead screw. So these go back and forth. If you do not have the parts tight here to keep it in place, it'll not go back and forth. Instead, the different parts of the screw will just separate and it won't work. This is used, imagine like a rubber ducky in a shooting gallery that goes back and forth. It'll be something like this. So it allows you to make things that go along those lines. That is the lead screw. The next up is going to be a little out of order, but because I have the monster facing this way, we have the cam and lifter. The idea is that the cam turns, and then the lifter will go up until the cam hits its peak, and then drop. Now, I made a mistake when I built this. The center line of the cam needs to be directly over the center line for this shaft, and it's not. So it actually starts to get stuck right here, and it'll start to break. So I need to move that. But this is a cam and lifter. This is often used in the valves in cars. You can also use this as a pop-up if you're making something go up and down. So that is the cam and lifter. And then on the other side is another cam-based gear, which, by the way, if you notice, this cam can only go in one direction. If it tries to go backwards, that large flat side is going to hit the lifter, and it's not going to go. But I 3D printed something for you guys. This is a universal cam. It can go both directions. So it can go left and right, so you can go forward and back, which is really neat, the fact that you can make your own parts for Vex. I also 3D printed, while I'm on the topic, this little mushroom thing, which looks weird, but it's a safety tool, because sometimes the shafts will get stuck when you're trying to put them in there. And so what you'll do is you'll put your hand on the back of it and you'll start pressing hard. And then what's my rule for safety? Don't
stab each other.
Yeah, don't stab each other, but also don't bleed. Yeah, no stabbing, no bleeding. So the little blue caps that I 3D printed actually can be put on the end, and then you can push on those instead of pushing on your hand and stabbing yourself in the hand, because nobody wants to get stabbed in the hand. Right? Good. I was just checking. That was a test. All right, watch me drop this on my iPad. Well, not my problem, right? So here you can see the cam again. Now, it's centered on this shaft right here, and it'll turn, but since the way it turns is elliptical, so it'll make, here, I'll physically make it, I'll make it turn. You see it goes forward and back, and then if it doesn't fall off the end, which it probably will, yep, it did. Here, just watch, just imagine. Yay! It'll go back and forth, kind of like how a Sawzall works, if you ever see that. So I built this thing to do all the things at once, and this is the one part of it that I could never get to work right all the time. So if I fire it up, it'll make a lot of noise, spin around, and then this will go flying off. Was your class the one where it like literally broke and fell off? Like both the gear and this part fell off? No? All right, cool. So